This is a La Bataille PME Rules for Napoleonic Grand Tactical Warfare 1792 to 1815 rule study. And in my play so far, a lot has come up about the Tirailleurs or skirmish, I guess, formations and combat. So there's infantry skirmishers and cavalry skirmishers. Let's see. Yeah, when in a single hex, the skirmisher has 4 front hex sides, 2 flank hex sides. Units deployed in 2 hexes. So basically, the single hex, it's 2/3 of the way around are considered a front. Units deployed in 2 hexes in skirmish order have 6 front hex sides, 2 flank sides, and 2 rear hex sides. Cavalry may not charge or move into or through other non-cavalry formations, with the exception of infantry in carré, skirmish order, artillery in square, or limbered artillery. Refused flanks. For a unit in a line formation, a flank hex is considered refused as long as it also is the front hex of an adjacent unit in any formation except units in skirmisher order. Cavalry may freely move or charge through hexes containing friendly units in skirmish order, or all units in square, or friendly limbered artillery or other friendly cavalry formations. All infantry battalions and companies which are given a skirmisher fire multiple on the fire effects chart are considered to have an offensive fire range of 2 hexes and are permitted to enter skirmisher order. Units in skirmisher order with 3 or less increments have 4 front hex sides and 2 flank hex sides. If a unit in skirmisher order deployed in 2 hexes suffers sufficient losses, mandating that it adopt this formation in 1 hex, it does so as soon as the casualty is taken. Up to 3 increments may fire out of a hex containing a unit deployed in skirmisher order. And then in rare cases, a unit may have more than 6 increments and still be permitted to enter skirmisher order. In this case, the unit may exceed the stacking limit for skirmish order, but no more than 3 increments per hex may be used for fire purposes. The extra increment, or 2, is there to absorb losses and add to the melee strength. Okay. Units deployed in 2 hexes in skirmisher order have 6 front hex. That's a repeat. When units are deployed in skirmisher order, they have a range of 2 hexes for offensive fire. When firing at a target, this makes sense because the unit is deployed in a very loose order, giving each individual fire greater field of vision and field of fire, basically. When firing at a target 2 hexes distant, the fire is halved. In order to initiate opportunity or defensive fire, enemy units must be adjacent to the infantry skirmisher. In order to initiate, enemy units must be adjacent to the infantry skirmisher. Skirmishers, which are the declared target of a cavalry charge, may retreat before the cavalry if they are adjacent to infantry in good order, not DD or PGD, or general order terrain. Interesting, and makes sense. They must retreat into aforementioned hexes and do so without giving defensive fire or checking morale. Alright, skirmishers may not attempt to stand or form square in the face of charging cavalry. That makes sense. If the skirmishers are routed, the cavalry would trample them at the rate of 2 increments per remaining movement points. I guess that can be devastating. When not acting as skirmishers, the unit acts like regular infantry. Combat formations in skirmisher order have their melee value halved. That makes sense. The lack of mass. Therefore, if skirmishers are deployed in 2 hexes, the skirmishers would essentially have a quarter of their printed melee value per hex. Combat formations deployed as skirmishers may move through or be moved through by any friendly type of formation without penalty to either set of units. Units may deploy into skirmisher order when in a hex with other friendly units of the same type, but may never end a movement phase stacked with units in a different formation, or violate the maximum stacking limit for each hex. Cavalry, tirailleurs, or skirmishers. Certain types of light cavalry may perform as mounted skirmishers. Any light cavalry unit with a skirmish factor may act as cavalry skirmishers. Cavalry in skirmisher order is inverted and deployed in 2 hexes, regardless of the number of increments in the unit. So there should never be a cavalry inverted in a single hex. Cavalry skirmishers affect the movement of infantry or artillery as follows. Entering or exiting a cavalry skirmisher zone of influence will cost 3 additional movement points if the hex is adjacent to the cavalry skirmishers. This is interesting. This is how you can use skirmishers to influence the enemy's ability to move. When an enemy combat formation moves adjacent to cavalry skirmishers, the tirailleur may fire and retreat before offensive fire if, this is interesting, if the enemy unit is not an unlimbering artillery unit or cavalry skirmisher. So this again is a use of cavalry skirmishers to counter the enemy's skirmishers. This retreat occurs after defensive fire by the tirailleurs, but before the offensive fire of the phasing player. If the enemy moving adjacent unit is unlimbering enemy artillery, the cavalry skirmishers may fire before the artillery unit unlimbers, opportunity fire, and then remain to give defensive fire on the unlimbered artillery, then retreat 1 hex, but must face offensive fire due to the nature of artillery range. The effects described, movement or retreat before combat, is the rule in the rule above, are cancelled by moving any enemy light cavalry formation, not necessarily in cavalry skirmisher order, next to the enemy cavalry, tirailleurs, or skirmishers. Cavalry skirmishers may fire their total skirmish factor at all adjacent combat formations. Example, 3 enemy units occupy hexes adjacent to cavalry skirmishers. 2 are in column in 1 hex each, while the third is deployed in 2 hexes in line. 4 hexes are therefore occupied by enemy units. The cavalry skirmishers formation may make 3 fire attacks, 1 each upon the units deployed in column and 1 upon the unit deployed in line. In each fire attack, the cavalry skirmishers fire at full skirmish fire value as indicated on the specific side. So that's printed firepower. Looks to me like printed firepower. Cavalry acting as cavalry skirmishers may not charge. That makes sense. No mass. Melee at half their printed value, and may only retreat before combat if there is a printed movement differential of 2 or more in their favor. Okay. Any combat formation with a fire factor may initiate an offensive fire attack as long as the range and line of sight provisions are not violated. All infantry not in skirmisher order have a range of 1 hex. All infantry not acting as skirmishers have a range of 1 hex. Yes. Only 3 increments may fire from a hex while in skirmisher order. Repeat. These combat formations include, certain combat formations may exercise an option to withdraw prior to melee combat. This retreat occurs before the pre-melee morale check, but after offensive fire. These combat formations include skirmishers facing infantry, cavalry and limbered. Cavalry acting as skirmishers presents a specialized case for firing and then retreating before combat given their mobility. Okay.